Welcome to Roundhill Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we talk about when we talk about faith. Hey, Ed.
Hey, Leslie, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Going.
It's going. It is going.
It's going.
You know, and sometimes that's exactly where we are. As we sometimes say in choir, it's been a week. You know, we just kind of sometimes look at each other on Sunday morning and just go,
I'm reading.
I saw you 7 days ago, and yeah.
Right?
That's all we can say.
I'm reading, of all things, the notebooks of Sonny Rollins, famous jazz musician. And
cool.
I found out about him from a good friend. And I've just been leafing through it the other day. It's absolutely hilarious. But he says at one point, here's the basics. Get up, dress up, and show up. So, you know, if you're not sure what else you can bring to the party, at least those three things will get you moving in the right direction. So.
You know, that's kind of like a sermon unto itself.
Isn't it great?
I feel like,
I love it.
I like that a lot.
So
it's a new month.
A new month.
So shockingly, well, it will be, you know, by the time you probably get around to listening to this, friends. We're looking into June, and thus brings with it a new theme, a new value, a new quality. I still don't know what word to use for this. Can you tell? For our sermon series, What Matters Most, we're looking at faith.
Faith. Yes.
And unlike last month's theme, teamwork, faith seems rather obvious.
Right? Like, why
It's
was
like-
this not back in September, right?
Right. Yeah, because it's like, this is hilarious, me attempting to quote scripture, but you know, the three things of faith, hope, and love, you know, kind of the basics,
Yes.
if you will.
Yep.
And so we've done hope, we've done love,
We
we've
have.
covered them. All that material is still there for you on roundhillcommunitychurch.org if you want to come check it out. Lovingly curated by Krista. And now we are here at faith. Almost
Yeah.
at the end, frankly. We only have after faith month. We have 2 more months.
Isn't that amazing?
Which is wild.
In fact, and those 2 months are words that really don't even fit into the biblical vocabulary, you know, curiosity and clarity. So we're marching off the map.
It's cool stuff. It's good
Yeah.
stuff. I love this list. It is, the width and breadth is exciting. So
Yeah.
faith is like I said, somewhat potentially obvious, but I also feel like it's another one of those layered ideas. A lot of the time when we approach a new theme, we talk about sort of similar words or other language we use around it. So what's some other language we use to either talk about faith or describe faith?
I think that when people think of the word faith, they sometimes also think about belief. So that it's what they believe in, you know, what, in a sense, where they invest themselves. You know, if they really feel like they are going to put a particular emphasis in their lives on one thing, they have faith in that thing. They believe in it, right? So it's that. I think the other word that I like to sometimes use in place of faith is the word trust. And to me, that's a somewhat more dynamic word, you know, and we use that word in our language. We have a trust fall. We don't have a faith fall. So trust is a kind of a heightened vulnerability goes along with trust. And I think that that's what, I think that it gets at the heart of faith, which is this expression of belief. As one author has said it, that it's this trust that there is at the heart of all the universes a being who loves us. And that's a comment from a writer named Richard Lisher. So, you know, and that takes faith because it is faith in things that aren't seen, that aren't provable in the way that things can sometimes be provable. And we're getting into the land of hunches and hopes and gambles. Faith has often been described by many great authors over the centuries as a gamble. So you are, without a whole lot of evidence and a whole lot of data necessarily, or at least not the kind of data that we use to make decisions, you're making a big decision that I not only believe in this being, but I trust this being with my life, with my decisions, and I invest hopes in this relationship. So those are some words that have nuance. And I'll say that the ancient Greek word pistis does have this sort of double side of faith and belief. It's what we believe in, but it's also what we trust in.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because to me, faith can be both static and active. It can be both like in the present of like, like you said, like I believe in God. I have faith. I'm a faithful person, and faithful has its own corner of language. But then there's also looking towards, looking forwards of, faith in the future, hope in the future, believing that things can get better, or that things can be the way that you want them to be, or that you feel like they should be, that's more aligned with whatever you're looking at. And so it's kind of got both elements wrapped into it. Like you said, there's like trust and this idea of like the becoming of the world into something ideal or better.
Yeah, I love
which is
that.
Interesting.
I think you've said it beautifully. It does have this, if it's static and active, it's both sides of this. It feels like something that you can describe. And in that sense, it may be, that's sort of maybe the less active part of it. And we are fortunate to live at a time when there's some wonderful writers who are writing about faith. And one of the most humorous of them all is a woman named Anne Lamott. And her books are really all about what it feels like to be faithful and how fragile that can seem, and yet also how robust it can make us. And as you've said, it's an active relationship like any other active relationship, with an ebb and a flow going back and forth all the time. And so I think that's a beautiful way of characterizing it.
Well, I think it's interesting too, because I kind of stumbled onto the aspect of faithfulness, which obviously in a relationship is about being, true to your partner. And then I think faithfulness is also about like a consistency, about a like you picture. To me, I picture something long lasting. I can picture something with dedication. I picture a relationship with steadfastness, are kind of all language that comes to mind when I think about faithfulness, which is obviously akin to what we're talking about in some ways.
Yeah, I'm curious. I think you're saying a lot there that's really a different way of looking at the word, in terms of the quality of steadfastness. That there is a consistency about it, right? It's a relationship. Yes, it may have its moments when it's a little more intense than at other times, or maybe we'll feel more connected at some times rather than at others. But there is this thread that runs through it, this thread that's always there, and that's the essence of the relationship. So I think it's really worth thinking about that in relationship to faith.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. So I think of them as our friends, friends, the disciples, our hapless friends, which is my new favorite descriptor for the old boys. And they really have become, and definitely through our podcast conversations over the last years, they've really become, in my mind, kind of like college frat boys. Like they are intelligent. They have a really strong like bond, but they're also kind of a disaster in like a really lovable way. Like they're finding their way into know whoever they're going to be, but they're going to flounder in the process. So what can we learn about faith from these hapless frat boys?
What can we learn about faith from them?
I'm sure they'd love to hear me. I'm sure they'd love to hear me call them that. Excuse me.
Speaking of steadfastness,
we're saints, like half of us.
Yeah. Well, speaking of steadfastness, one of the great things about the story of the disciples is that, of course, they're with Jesus, right, the whole way. Then basically they all abandon him for a period of time. And then they come back together. But the amazing thing is they still kind of stumble over each other, So you get into the book of Acts and it's like one thing goes sideways after another. But lo and behold, they're out there. And amazing things happen, either because of them or despite them. But they're quite the amazing group. I think one of the they're in a tough spot. Let's just be honest about it. They are, they're with someone who is this spirit-led, spirit-driven person who has a vision, and he's clear about that. And it's also clear from reading the stories about Jesus that he can have his moments where he kind of, loses it. And, he can be angry and frustrated and disappointed, and he is all those things with them. So I guess the one thing that we can learn from them is that they were always learners. That there wasn't a point in time where they said, got it, now we've got it. We fully understand what we're doing now, and now we're all set. That never really happens.
We've got our 10,000 hours. We're experts.
That's right. Yeah, we're proficient now. No, we're not. We're still learning and we're still growing. And I just think there's tremendous good news in that. So, we may have our moments as well, which we do. And the good news is that Jesus kept coming back to them, and I think that is actually a very powerful message, that he does continue to, sort of work with them, keep at them. And at times they're very disappointed in themselves. You can even pick this up in some of the stories. But they reach out to him, they come back to him, they stay in relationship with him. It's kind of a powerful example of community. And I think one of the most powerful examples of what faith looks like in the disciples, all condensed in one story, is when the disciples are out in a boat and Jesus comes to them walking on the water. And this is one of these really, profound stories full of richness in all kinds of ways. And Peter, whose name in Greek actually means rock, Petros, he sees Jesus and says, I want to do that. That looks fantastic. So this is really a great act of faith, right? He thinks Jesus can walk on the water, I can walk on the water. And he gets out there and he's walking on the water until he's not. And then there's this moment where he suddenly realizes, wow, I'm walking on water. That is weird. And the next thing you know, he's under. And Jesus, picks him back up and gets him inside the boat, and kind of then asks him a question, like, why did you lose faith? What happened there in that moment? And I think that is the most beautifully encapsulated story about faith, that it shows that we are capable. We have the capacity for remarkable love and adventure and risk, all in good directions. But that we also can lose focus and lose our way and go under. And people do. They do go under. And then, at that point, the arm has to come out, has to reach out and say, hey, get me back in the boat. Yeah. And so that's there. And it's also great that it kind of ends with this question, because the question is, so, what went wrong there? Yeah. And we never really get the answer, because I think the question sort of boomerangs back to us. So what do we think would happen? And what happens to us in those situations where we are moving in such an amazing direction and then we catch ourselves and think, oh gosh, I didn't know that I was actually going to do this skydiving. I only talked about it and dreamt about it. And now here I'm actually doing it. So that's kind of one way I think about this.
I don't know that I've ever given that story much thought before, But it makes me think of a couple different things. So stick with me for a second.
I'm with you.
So it makes me think back to the sort of Adam and Eve story of like, they were fine, they were happy. Oh, wait, we're not really wearing clothes.
Right.
Like everything's fine. They're in it. And then all of a sudden they're sort of looking on the outside and like, oh, how we appear to others is weird and different. And therefore this is bad.
Yep.
With that thing with Peter of like, he's walking on water, everything's fine. And then he's like, whoa, wait, what, you know? And so it makes me think of, this is such a random thing, but you know how when you're a teenager, you remember being bullied, you know, sometimes more times than you can remember, but you remember some of the big ones. This is not a big one, but this is one I remember, which was that I was at summer camp. There was a Christian summer camp in that our church used to go to called Camp Rutledge. It was good fun. It was great. It was everything you think of as summer camp. It was the cabins. It was the bugs. It was the heat. It was the lake, you know. And my friends and I were the like band, so to speak.
Oh my gosh.
And since I could never be bothered to properly learn how to play the guitar, I can kind of play, but I just never really tried hard. I was the singer. And they would occasionally handle me a tambourine, which I would just want to whack them over the head with. And I was like, because it was like such a trope, like the girl singer with the tambourine.
Right.
Like,
oh my
bite
gosh.
Me. Anywho, that's not the point of the story. So I remember my friend Tyler and I had learned this song and we were really enjoying it. And so we were singing this song together, this little duet about like sisters and brothers and togetherness and friendship. It's a great song. I'll have to find it for you. It's very folksy. And I was having fun. I was in it. I was like enjoying the performance. I was enjoying the music. I was enjoying making music with my friends. And then I look out and there's like this girl who I genuinely thought was my friend, like doing this like little mime thing, like making fun of me. And it was like that outside in of like I thought it was great. I was having so much fun. I didn't think it was perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I was enjoying myself. I was trying to like share the music with others, and all of a sudden I was like snapped out of it because I like saw it from outside with critical eyes. And I was like, oh, okay. And you've never seen like confidence go.
Right.
And that kind of makes me think of the Peter story.
That is
because he's powerful. Like he was in it, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Oh no!"
Right,
and literally sank.
Yeah.
Which I feel like that sinking of like, oh, there was all of that confidence I had about the thing I was trying to do.
Yep.
Made super unpleasant and made to sort of crumple because of this outside perspective. Sometimes it comes from ourselves. Sometimes it comes from other people, as it was in my story. Certainly, I do it to myself plenty.
Yeah, we can do that.
But I think it's interesting, this idea of like, I'm kind of coming around to this idea that maybe like faith in the divine is also faith in ourselves and what we're experiencing and passionate about, and not letting that outside become the inside. There's a phrase in parenting that's basically the things you say to your kids become their inner monologue.
Wow.
And I know that's true in my own inner monologue, like the various like parents and also like mentors and people I've just spent a lot of time, they've become my inner voice, and I've had to over a number of years like get rid of some of them. Evict some of them from my brain apartment. But I think that idea of like we can make it our inside and like let it sink us, when having the faith, having trust and belief in ourselves, in our purpose, in our calling, is the thing that's going to let us walk on water.
Beautiful. Well, wow. May I make a quick segue, little comment
about
that?
I'm done. Go ahead.
well, listen, there's really nothing that should be said after that, because it's a beautiful comparison between the two stories, for one thing. And I think all of us listening to you describe your experience have probably had a moment or something. We can certainly, hear you very clearly about what you're describing and even feel a little bit of that moment that, through our imagination that you felt, which is that's quite a moment of reckoning, right? Where you see that. I was thinking two things. One of them is that Peter, first of all, we promote awareness, right? It's good. We say it's good to be self-aware. And awareness is key to life in all kinds of ways. But it's interesting. There is a certain that critical awareness, which is not, I think, true awareness, but that self-criticism that sort of comes out of, I'm aware of myself now walking on water, and this isn't maybe something I should be doing, and it's got to be a fluke, and the next thing you know, you're down in the water. So it's a curious thing about awareness. Sometimes we have to be careful that it's that self-critical moment can be really damaging. In many of the stories where Jesus heals someone, his response is quite often, "Your faith has made you well." So he doesn't take credit for it. And in fact, he deliberately pushes the focus away from himself towards the person. As you're saying, it's our capacity for this that makes us strong. And it's our capacity for this that enables us to do the thing that we're being called to do. So it's almost as if he has to also remind people, you actually don't need me around here to do this. This is something that you all have the capacity to do. So it's a very interesting, thing that he does there. So
that's really beautiful because it makes them participants in their healing.
It does. It makes them indispensable participants, that he, and there are occasions when he does things that are not accompanied by those words, but those words are often used and in a variety of settings, with men and women. And I think that there's something to really explore there about why he does that, why he is so adamant about that.
Yeah, it makes me think back to my beloved Dalcroze Eurythmics professor from college. We had a 7:30 a.m. class,
my heavens.
which was rough, and we had it was. Let me set the stage a little bit because it's just as we're imagining. It's a mid-century modern building, and there's this corner classroom that's like all windows, right? And that's where they put it. I think they'd outfitted it like a dance studio.
Okay.
So that floors and I think there were some mirrors and stuff. And so Dalcroze, in the practice of it, you do a lot of walking. So we'd walk in circles, and do a lot of clapping and the rhythms of the tempo and rhythm of your feet with your hands, and I'm summarizing here. But sometimes we would do very complex rhythms between our hands and feet. So, in the same period of time, you're walking 5 steps, but you're clapping 7 claps, and they have to align just so. And so he would he'd consistently say 2 things, which I always appreciated. One was, don't be weird. Just because we would all start walking like we were robots because we'd be so focused, we forgot how to walk. And so he's like, don't make it weird. Just walk. And of course, we're fully in the sight of every kid coming into class that morning.
Of course.
Of course, because that's the way. But everyone had taken this class, so it was kind of like a nod, I've been there.
Yep.
And then the other thing he would say that has really stuck with me and that I use a lot is think about what you're doing, not how you're doing. And that for me, when I'm tackling something where my creativity needs to show up, but my critical eye won't shut up. I have to tell myself, I've literally written that on stuff because for me, it's to me, my creativity can't be there if I'm being critical. And so it's I'm not going to be able to even practice properly if I'm criticizing myself while I'm doing it.
Yep.
And so I wonder if there's something in that, with your art. I don't know if you've shown up and it's not today.
Yeah. Oh, yes, indeedy.
I've heard that a lot with creatives. Don't like that. With people who exercise their creativity.
Expressing their creative energy, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That think about, but I love that. Just sometimes it can snap me out of it. Of just like, think about what you're doing, not how you're doing.
Yeah.
Especially because we would talk a lot about
Good
how
distinction.
like the little voice in your head while you're playing would be like, do you know what the next note is?
Oh yeah.
I don't think you know. Which is it supposed to be the third finger or the fourth finger that's supposed to play that note? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?
It's kind of a miracle that our mind
play.
can do that to us, isn't it? I mean,
I know. I've sometimes in recitals, I'm going way left field with this. I have made grocery lists in my head.
oh my heavens.
Just to get the voice to simmer down.
Yeah, that's right.
We're gonna think about something else with our active mind so that the body can play the organ and the brain can go shh. I'm like, I think we need some bananas.
There you are. Yep. I feel centered now.
Which is to lead us back to faith.
Yes, right?
Somehow. But I think there's an element of like faithfulness, of belief and trust, and I like all of these things. I'm excited to explore this theme together. This is the sort of last few weeks of the choir season, so we have some fun stuff to explore there too. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think that what's coming up in the conversation that I hadn't really expected is a lot of conversation about focus. And it's interesting that we're going to be winding up this whole year-long series with a month exploration of clarity. And I think what you're describing, what's happening in your mind, right, is what's the focus there, and when the intrusions are there, how do you help them to find the back door so that you can be clear about what it is that you're doing? And I think that's...
I'm just a couple months ahead is clearly what's happening.
Exactly. Well, it's good because there's a nice crossover, I think, between these months, right? No one virtue exists unto itself. They all kind of work in combination. We're exploring them kind of one at a time. But sometimes when I'm preparing messages for this sermon series, I will definitely go back to one of the virtues that we've explored earlier, and kind of think about that a little bit. So it's made this a very, very rich time.
Do you find yourself going back to one more than others, or is it like a cumulative experience for you?
I would say without question, I go back to imagination more than any of the others. And I think the first one. And I think that it's interesting that we place faith here so far down the road, because maybe some other faith might seem to be an immediate response, that trust might be like that. But actually, the mind is a curious thing. It can, as you just said, it can scroll through a lot of options before it finally hits upon the thing that it really wants to choose. And I think that these values are really always in conversation with each other. And so it could be a moment of love that inspires us to be faithful. It could be our imagination creating a new vision, and then we say, I can place my trust in that. I'm willing to take a gamble on that. It could be an expression of gratitude. We hear so much about the power of gratitude and how healing it can be. And there can be a very close relationship between being grateful for, I would say, to put it in the terms we've been discussing tonight, not only to be grateful for, all that we've received in so many different ways and things that make our lives meaningful and purposeful. But it's also, it's kind of Jesus reaching back to us saying, I believe in you. It goes both ways. And so I can see how all of these virtues might show up in a single act of faith. You might have all of them present in some little way. But you'd only know it if you stopped for long enough to tease each one of them out. And I think that would be a really remarkable thing to do.
That's really interesting. Do you have a final story about faith that you want to share with us today?
I do have a final story about faith. And it's a short story, luckily. So I was sitting in a classroom at the Weston School of Theology, which is a Jesuit school of theology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And wonderful teachers there. And one of the teachers was talking about a phrase that appears in the letter to the Galatians, which is the letter that appears in the New Testament. And we think it might have been written by St. Paul, but it also may not have been. But there's a little phrase in that where he actually encourages his readers. And here's the phrase. It's most often translated as to have faith in Jesus. And that makes sense. We hear that all the time, right? That's an important element of Christian belief, have faith in Jesus. Well, he said, actually, it doesn't so much say faith in Jesus, but have the faith of Jesus. And there's
that's different.
Big whopping difference between those two phrases. And they're actually, the faith of Jesus is probably the more correct reading, because the case that's used, the grammatical case that's used is not, is one that implies that kind of ownership or ofness, right? Mm-hmm. So I have thought about that constantly over the years, because one of those phrases can make you feel kind of passive and hope that Jesus is going to do the heavy lifting here.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a little Jesus take the wheel kind of a situation.
You got it. Yeah. And the other one is, wow, what is the faith of Jesus? That's a big question. That's got a lot of rooms in it, right? That takes a lot of exploring.
That's a really high bar. I don't ever think I can reach.
I'm just saying. I've been at this a few years, and I feel like I've just gotten through the ante room, So,
yeah,
but I love the distinction between those two phrases, and it just has caught my attention so many times over the years. What does it mean? What in the world does that mean to have the faith of Jesus? And here's a man who's actually encouraging us to do it. So I think part of what will be fun in this month is to see how we think about stories that can pull us out and, help us to imagine what that would look like.
Wow. Words matter. Translations matter.
Don't they, though? Don't they
Goodness.
just? Yep.
Well, that is a great story. And thank you for walking through us this new sermon series, this new sermon theme on faith. I think it's going to be a great month of exploring this idea, this big idea and this little idea and all the little ideas within it. And thank you all so much for listening. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, there are a few things that you can do that would make a big difference to us. Like the video, subscribe if you aren't, and click the notification bell and select all. Thank you.